I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have the roll call, please?
Scott Hansen. Here. Ben Terrell.
Here.
Lisa Lewitsky.
Here.
Ray Whitaker.
Here.
Ed Kemp.
Here.
Tim Catron.
Here.
Zachary Dillinger. Frank Holmes.
Here.
Brian Ross.
All of the proper notices have been sent. What are the wishes for the agenda? Now we're going to open up the nominations and elections for chairperson, vice chair, and secretary. Nominations are now open for the office of chair to the Planning Commission for 2025. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Brian Ross.
Brian Ross has been nominated for the office of chair. Are there others?
I move that the nominations be closed and the unanimous ballot be cast to elect Brian Ross for the position of Chair of the Planning Commission.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Chairman Ross, you are now taking over. Your cheat sheet is up there, sir.
All right, thank you. Next on the nominations are for vice chair. Nominations are now open. Would anyone like to make a nomination?
Nominate Ben Terrell.
Anyone support? We have a motion support. Are there any other nominations?
Hearing none, I move that nominations be closed and a unanimous ballot be cast to elect Ben Terrell for the position of Vice Chair of the Planning Commission.
Okay, all in favor of Ben Terrell as vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
We need a second to Tim's motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Support.
All in favor of Ben Terrell being the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Next on the nominations are open for Secretary of the Planning Commission. Are there any nominations?
I'll nominate Zach Dillinger.
Okay, Zach Dillinger has been nominated for the office of Secretary. Are there any others?
Okay, hearing no others, I move that nominations be closed and a unanimous ballot be cast for Zach Dillinger for the office of Secretary of the Planning Commission.
Support.
We have a motion support. If we, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. We have a slate now, or have our officers. What are your wishes for the December 3rd minutes? Anyone?
I'll move the minutes.
Support.
We have a motion support to approve the December 3rd, 2024 minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Okay, motion carries. Next on the agenda is public comments for anything, that would be for anything that's not on the agenda this evening. Okay, seeing none, we'll move into the public hearing of conditional use permits and DCAs. If we could have, I believe we're gonna do a refreshed staff report. If we could get that from staff on CU-10-15-25, please.
Need a motion to remove it from the table first, please.
Make motion, Dave.
Okay,
Support.
Frank made the motion. Ben support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay, now can we have staff report?
You sure can. Before I read that, I do have one other item to pass out from Mr. and Mrs. Wills. I told them that I'd be doing it before I read my staff report, so it didn't get confusing. I need one. So Chris will pass this out. In front of you, you have a very, very, very brief memo that lists what it's attached to. The previously reviewed site plans regarding the campground from 2015 until current. Commissioner Terrell had asked for them at the last meeting, and it was a brilliant idea. You will notice that, you will see that they're highlighted, and it's starting with the 2015. You'll see that it's an existing layout, and then the back side of that is what was approved in 2015. And then it goes to the 2016 site plan, which was denied by the Planning Commission, a 2018 site plan, what was submitted, and then what was approved. The Planning Commission only approved parts of that site plan in 2018, and I worked with Mr. Wills from July until October when I could get a plan that I could approve based on the Planning Commission's motion. You have the 2021 site plan that was approved by the Planning Commission, and then you have the current site plans that were submitted and heard in December, along with a letter that was forwarded to the Planning Commission dated December 6th with a site plan outlining the items 1 through 11 in the staff report. So those are all of the site plans that have to do with the campground since Mr. and Ms. Wills took ownership in 2015. Also attached is photos that were taken from my inspection of the property on January 9th. If the Planning Commission wishes, I'm actually going to go through them. The very first photo, when you're going in on the property, shows the location of the big barn to the west of Campground Drive. You can see that there are some tractors, but there is a bucket truck and some other items located outside there. I have circled the bucket truck in red. This is one of the locations that Mr. and Ms. Wills is asking to park tractors and trailers and things that are used for the maintenance of the campground. I do not know how a bucket truck is used for the maintenance of a campground. The next photo is items located outside of the construction contractor's fenced area. All of those items did in fact appear to be tractors, lawnmowers, trailers, and mowing equipment. The next photo is a photo taken from between lots 1 and 3 showing Miss Miller, Diane Miller's home. Miss Miller is one of the adjacent property owners to the east. I'm standing kind of at Campground Drive. The second photo is Miss Miller's house from Lot 1. That is a rustic cabin, one of the cabins that Mr. and Miss Wills are proposing to turn into a resort cabin. I have circled Miss Miller's house in red. The second photo was taken from Lot 2. I have circled the location of Miss Miller's house in red. The following photo is of Miss Miller's house and the barns between lots 3 and 4. The following 4 photos are of a camper that I believe is located on lot 5 that is in disrepair. The roof needs to be repaired, the tires are sinking into the ground. I could not see in the windows, but given the state of this camper, it should be removed from the property. The next photos are taken from lots 6, 7, and 8. Again, I'm kind of standing in Campground Drive, and I've circled Miss Miller's barns. I believe that the building on the left is Miss Miller's barn, not quite sure. The following photo is one of the private property signs that's located on an approximate 3-foot wire fence near sites 8 and 9. The wire fence does go from 4 foot to some areas to 3 foot. The following 2 photos shows the downed fence, the wired fence, that it wasn't completely down between near lots 8 through 10. Following 2 photos, sorry. The next photo is a view of Mr. Hickok's property from lots 13, 14, 70, and 69. I have circled his, I believe, house and barns and campers. Mr. Hickok is a property owner to the east of the campground towards the south, so the southeast. The next photo is a view of Miss Miller's property from sites 14 and 70. The next photo is a view of Miss Miller's property from lot 70, closer to the wire fence. The next photo is a view of Mr. Hickok's property from lot 69. In this photo, you can see Mr. Hickok's house and his campers. The following photo is a view of Miss Miller's property from lot 69. I've circled her barns. The following, I think, 3 photos are of the fence and berm on lots 67 and 68. The berm does not meet zoning ordinance requirements. The Planning Commission required either a berm or site-proof fence adjacent to lots 67 and 68. The building circled in red is Mr. Hickok's home. And then the following photos of a motor home. I put lot 67. I'm not sure which way the campsites go, left or right. Jeff and Carrie can maybe give clarification, because right next to it, it does say lot 68, but I'm not sure if it's on 67 or 68, is a motor home that is in fact dilapidated. I was able to see inside that motor home. It is covered in dust and garbage and things of that nature. And then the nature of this motor home has one of the beds that kind of go over the cab of the motorhome, and parts of those seals are actually broken off, and that is also kind of sinking into the ground. And so it would be recommended that that be removed from the property as well. And the last photo is of vehicles located to the south of the pole barn, which is located on the east side of the entrance. That photo is of a car and 2 trucks. One of the trucks has a plow, and then I want to say it's a ditch witch, which does trenching. It's located right there. Again, that's another area where Mr. and Ms. Wills are asking for storage of trailers and tractors. So that's from my on-site inspection on the 29th, on the 9th, sorry, of January. We received communication from Ms. Diane Miller. Ms. Diane Miller is here to speak under public comment, but she has asked that I read this into record, and she submitted photos from her perspective. Here are the photos taken on January 9th of 2025. The property line is between my property and the campground. Campsites 6 through 69, 68 are on this property line. Photos 1 through 4. These photos show campsite 68, 69, an old damaged RV that has been parked there for several years. Also, the old wire cattle fencing that separates the campground from my private property. That the fence runs from campsite 69, 68 and ends at campsite 6, approximately 400 feet. Photo 5 is the back of the campsite number 6, where the old fence stops. A land survey steel pipe is also in the photo. There is no further fencing from this point along the property line north. Photo number 6, this shows an open wood line on my property at the back of campsites approximately 30 foot wide. Note the fence is on the ground in places, nailed to trees, and wound around survey posts. It does not prevent the campers from coming onto my property. As the photo shows, there is no ground berm along the lines. The approximate 30-foot wide tree line does not block the noise, traffic, light pollution, transcendence, or continual campground commotion. It should be the responsibility of any private business to secure its area. These photos show the area show that there is no property boundary to keep campers on the campground property. Because of this, I am asking for a solid fence barrier be built on the campground side of the property line prior to the next camping season. Barrier fences for this purpose as described in the Eaton County Zoning Ordinance Article 17. Also, that the fence be maintained and kept its integrity as a barrier. The campground is a private business that continues to expand in this quiet rural area. The neighborhood around the campground has been affected in detrimental ways with reasons given above. During the camp season, the neighborhood is no longer quiet and rural. For these reasons, I am not in favor of any further expansion to the campground. There should be a limit to how much disruption is allowed to a rural area for its residents, and that is from Ms. Diane Miller. Not included is another communication from another property owner. Randy Pearson. Good afternoon, Ms. Miller. I was told that if I wrote an email regarding the expansion of Sherwood Forest Campground, you would be able to have it read during the meeting. If that is possible, please read the following. Thank you. I am the owner of the house at 5460 Sherwood Highway in Olivet. My house is directly across from the Sherwood Forest Campground. It has recently become brought to my attention by a neighbor, not by any public notice, that the campground is requesting some major expansions on their property. While I don't have enough information to outright oppose this expansion, I do want to make it clear that I have some reservations regarding this. As of now, Sherwood Highway is a quiet road in a quiet community, which is a major part of the reason why I bought this property 11 years ago. This expansion to me sounds like this road will become much busier and would be busier during the entire year. During the winter, this section of Sherwood Highway, specifically from Olivet to the other side of the bridge over I-69, is not well maintained. It is a problem currently with the limited amount of traffic, but if these proposed changes take place, specifically turning some of the cabins into what sounds like a year-round housing, the road will need to be much better maintained, especially in the winter months. We have already seen a traffic accident at that bridge that resulted in a fatality. All I can ask is that the sanctity of the surrounding neighborhood be taken into consideration before approving all of these changes. I have repeatedly had to pick up trash around my mailbox and on and near my driveway. I would prefer not to increase. I like my quiet, peaceful house and neighborhood. My only wish is for it not to be disrupted by these changes. Thank you, Randy Pearson, 5460 Sherwood Highway, Olivet. Also not included is Walton Township's communication. The clerk, Erin Cummings, originally sent me a communication that said at the December 10th board meeting of the Walton Township Board, it was presented with the latest site plans and expansion of the changes to CUP 102525. The board approved a motion to require a privacy fence on the east side of the property line adjacent to sites 6 through 14. The supervisor sent a second email in that says, correction, it was to lots 6 through 69 for the fence. So Walton Township Board approved the request and recommended a solid privacy fence be built on the east property line between sites 6 through 69. Where am I at in my little memo? There is a communication from Mr. and Ms. Wills that was sent in on Monday, and then another communication from Mr. and Ms. Wills that was received today, January 14th of 25, along with the additional communication that he brought to the Planning Commission meeting this evening. So you have 4 communications from Mr. and Ms. Wills. Okay. Staff comments. It's important to note that the campground is licensed as a year-round campground by Eagle. A construction permit has already been issued in June of 2024. This permit expires in June of 2027. A copy of the construction permit is located on page 48 of the staff report reviewed by the Planning Commission at the December 3rd, 2024 meeting. If the Planning Commission allows for the construction of the proposed resort cabins, clear regulations will be needed for enforcement. Examples are, how large may each resort cabin be? It is requested up to 1,000 square feet, citing kitchen and laundry facilities are required by the State of Michigan Building Code. Kitchen and laundry facilities are not required. A restroom with a shower, toilet, sink, and service sink are the minimum requirements for the resort cabins. A service sink, just for clarification, is a ground sink used for cleaning. So to be able to dump a mop bucket out into, or to be able to clean out a mop. So those are the minimum requirements for a resort cabin. We do not have clear parameters for the size of each existing camping site. Setback requirements for the proposed resort cabins from other structures and each other should be discussed. A time frame for the proposed resort cabins may be rented. In addition, staff comments still remain the same on the last couple of pages of the staff report. Do I need to read that into record again? If the planning commission, under their deliberations, could be so kind as to go through items 1 through 11, and then write down any regulations and conditions you come up with, so we do have a clear motion for the applicant and for staff. And that completes what I have for a staff report.
I think everybody's got a lot of this thrown at them. Would you like to spend a few minutes reading it, looking at it, or do you feel we're ready to? I think I'm gonna allow the applicant to come up here and talk to us again. Does anyone, everybody caught up, or do they want to read some stuff first? Tim?
I'd like to read for a minute.
Couple minutes, 5 minutes, good?
That's plenty.
Okay. We can take till 7:25, just review some of the written stuff. I think there's plenty here that I don't even know you could read in 5 minutes. I think we've all kind of checked on some of it. Okay, it's 7:25. Guess if the applicant would like to come forward, if he has anything to address.
All right, thanks for the opportunity again to discuss our project here. Again, I want to make sure that if you guys have any questions or any clarification on anything, that we ask those questions. I want to make sure that we're as clear as we can. I mean, I thought we made the best effort to put forward as to what our plans were and get those spelled out last time. So with the updated site plan there, we listed the 11 items, where those items are at. So on your big maps, you'll see a picture of what the jump pillow looks like and what the restrooms look like, and whatnot. As far as since that meeting, basically the new site plan, and then we went to Walton Township. We're, a lot of communication, obviously, in the last day on the fence issue. We kind of thought that that was more or less somewhat of a mute issue. However, it got pushed kind of through Walton Township without any conversation. So we talked about the plans. They went for a vote. And then the new supervisor mentioned that Mrs. Miller requested the fence, so they added that in at the end right before they made the vote. There was no discussion about the need of the fence, why the fence was asked for, or anything along that lines before they made their motion to do that. So I thought it was important that we address the fence.
If I may, Chair, I just want clarification that it's Mrs. Diane Miller, not me.
Right, and
That's who he's referring to.
yes, I actually put that as the last item in there, that I'm not trying to disrespect Mrs. Miller, but they got the same last name, so when I say neighbor, it's no disrespect to her. It's just so that we're not getting it confused. The handout that we handed out this evening, that I did late this evening, basically laid out all the discussion that we had at previous planning commissions. So it listed the date when that planning commission was, what page number it was of the staff report, and then I copied the excerpt out of that. That kind of gives you an idea. As far as the fence down, it's a cattle fence. It's kind of on a hinge type system, so if a branch fell on it or somebody tried jumping over it or whatever, it's gonna move. So the area that she took a picture where they're saying the fence is down, we can obviously add more support to that so that it doesn't bend over that way. That is a long stretch. I looked at it this afternoon. For the most part, I thought the fence was still upright, but in that area, it kind of hinges over a little bit. So if you take a picture from the top of it, it looks like it's sitting on the ground, but I don't know that anything was sitting directly on the ground.
If you're asking me a question, yes, it was.
Okay.
And it is in my photos.
Okay. So we can fix the fence. That's not an issue. I try to go around and make sure that those are upright on a regular basis. So if that was down, I'll look at it again and see. So I do want to mention that, in the previous planning commissions, Mrs. Miller was directly asked, about the operation of the campground. She didn't have any issues. She actually stated, like page 33, paragraph 5, line 5 down, Mrs. Miller stated fencing issues between the property and campground was addressed a couple years ago. A fence was installed. It has fixed the problem of people trespassing onto her property. So I'm not really sure what she's asking for the fence for, if she's implying that people are trespassing through that. I would think it would be hard to cross that fence. I wouldn't be able to jump over it. I'm not sure that a child would be able to jump over it if it's upright. We had plenty of discussion on the fence several times, so I'm a little taken back, because the issue is if you're trying to install a fence along a tree line, you have a high probability of damaging the trees and creating even further issues with the trees dying, getting disease, falling over in branches. Brandy's comment about why would we have a bucket truck at the campground? Trees are our main issue there. So trimming tree branches up and trying to make sure that there's no dead limbs out there is an ongoing problem. So we have that truck there to deal with the trees and the branches and try to make sure that we don't have anything that's going to potentially hurt anybody. So I don't know if there's any specific questions. Again, there is a lot of information here. I did provide information from an arborist that basically states, what it does to trees if you plant too closely. Even a regular Google search on that tells you that, that's not a good idea. So, again, I'm sure that Mrs. Miller will come up and tell you what her intent is or whatever. We don't have any problems talking about that. So, if that's the only issue that we got, we could talk about the individual 11 items that we got on there. The other thing that I have on that page that I handed out was the act from Part 25 Public Health Code Act of 1978 due to Brandy's interdepartment memo or whatever you want to call it that talks about proximity around units. So their code is that you can't have anything within 4 feet of any structure. So you can't have things backed up to each other. So if we wanted 2 cabins or whatever, they're saying the minimum is 4 feet. I mean, realistically, you're probably going to be 15 to 20 feet apart. I don't think there's side setbacks within there, but whatever setbacks are required is something that we would go by, and that's something that we can discuss and put into record so that we clearly understand what we're looking at. I guess I open it up to questions. It was initially said that we can't go one at a time or whatever, so basically put everything out there and you guys can discuss and we can try to help clarify the best that we can.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have one. Are there any no trespassing signs posted at the edge
Yes,
of
on
the
the
property?
fence line. Yep, and there's pictures of that in the first packet that Brandy went over, or the pictures that she went out on the 9th and took pictures of. There's actually a picture in there.
How many were there along that stretch, Brandy?
I only saw one that said private property.
And that's,
I located which, let me find that packet. It's a black sign with white writing. I think it says private, it might say. It says private property, no trespassing, black sign with white writing. And it's approximately between sites 8 and 9.
you or Mr. Willis have any idea what it is from 6 to 69?
So
200 feet, 300 feet?
it's probably 200 or so. I do believe there's more than one sign, but if that's what she saw, we can.
That's all I saw.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I had, at one point, 5 total signs up. So there should be one right at 6, and then we tried to go like every 4 or 5 sites. Again, if that was specifically brought up, I would have looked at that this evening, but. And I can definitely add more signs, that's not an issue. If we want it every 4 sites, every 5 sites, we can definitely make sure that that occurs.
Might stop some of the accidental trespassing if there is any, I don't know.
Again, I think would be very unlikely that anybody could get over that fence, but if somebody did get over there, we've ask Ms. Miller if she has any issues or whatever, that she lets us know. We've never been contacted. Like we said at the last meeting, there hasn't been any complaints made on the campground since the last meeting. So if we don't know that there's people going over there, it's hard to address. If we knew that somebody jumped the fence and was playing over there, believe me, we'd be over there addressing it. So we don't want any issues with the neighbors, and we definitely don't want anybody getting hurt, so we wouldn't want anybody messing around the fence. So even if they were playing with the fence, we would say something if we were aware of it.
What's the height of that fence?
So Randy said that she measured it between 3 and 4 foot. I'm sure it's a 4-foot cattle fence. However, it does sit kind of at the top of a little bit of a berm, so when campers are coming in, you know, there's areas that probably could be as high as 5 feet if you're looking straight out. So you're standing there looking at the top of the fence. Some areas it could be higher than other areas, obviously, so it is the terrain. The other picture that we enclosed from the email that was sent last week is basically aerial shots of the property. And if you look at, I guess that was not this last staff report, but the previous staff report, the last picture actually showed an aerial shot as well. You can see that it's a solid tree line. So I'm assuming when the campground was built, they planted trees along the property line. It is a pretty solid line of trees along there. So during the summer months, when the camping season is in full force, I would be surprised if she could see any part of the campground. I'm not saying that she can't, but once you got foliage on the trees, I'm not sure that it's visible. The fence argument initially was about making sure that people weren't trespassing. Again, we definitely don't want that. You know, that's why the fence was initially put up, is to make sure that we didn't have any kind of issues like that.
Remind me, didn't we at one time talk about building up a berm?
So we built a berm at the end of Site 69, up towards the back of where our camping cabins are. So if you look at like the fourth picture from the end of Brandy's report, she has pictures of the berm. Part of the area where she doesn't think that we're in compliance is actually leaves. Again, maybe that's not compliant, but in the spring, we generally try moving those to further get foliage onto the existing berm. But the berm is towards the rear end of the campground, back by camping cabin 65. So if you got your big map, you would see it's back in that general area. And that berm is taller than I am, so. And again, she has a picture towards Mr. Hickok's house, which is the property behind Mrs. Miller's. Where you can kind of see that, you know, you got to see over the berm to actually see his house.
Brandy, which one of these pictures shows your berm, the berm? I don't know that okay.
So 4 pages back, starting back to 4 pages. That's all the berm and the fenced area. When the Planning Commission first discussed a berm or fenced area, you guys gave him an option. That berm does not meet any part of the zoning ordinance requirements for a berm, which is defined in Article 17. So I did require a fence to be installed. The Planning Commission gave the option of a solid 6-foot fence or a berm that met zoning ordinance requirements. That berm does not meet any zoning ordinance requirements. It is essentially yard waste.
You know, it looks a few feet tall, correct? Because you can see a 6-foot fence, 2 foot of the 6-foot fence above it.
Correct. His fence is compliant with what the zoning, with what the Planning Commission required at the time.
Okay.
The berm itself, outside of adding leaves to it for foliage or whatever, the berm is constructed out of dirt. Initially, we put stumps in there, we pulled those stumps, and we had dirt hauled in to redo that berm, because the initial concern was that Mr. Hickok wanted light and sound blocked, and more or less, the berm was a better solution for that at that time. That's why we built the berm along Mr. Hickok's area, is to block his property viewing and trying to block some sound, because his house is much closer to the campground. You'll see in one of the pictures that we sent in our email, it shows proximities of Ms. Miller's home to Site 67 and 68. She was trying to say that, you know, she can see that from her porch. If you look at the overview shot, it is impossible to see those sites from her porch, because she has her own barns and buildings that would block that view. As far as I know, there hasn't been any complaints from Mr. Hickok about noise or vision or whatever. Initially, he didn't like the berm with the stumps and whatnot, and we addressed that the best that we could. Yes.
Mr. Wills is referring to his communications that he submitted to myself on Monday. It doesn't have a date on it, and it starts off with, Brandy, are you able to provide the enclosed pictures to the packet for the planning commissioners? Please read into record for the planning commission. Thanks. So it's a document that doesn't have a date on it that is from Mr. and Mrs. Wills. The photos he's referring to are in that document.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Wills? Yes, please, Scott.
On the fence issue, posts are being used to support that.
It's,
Are the space apart?
it's, I think they're called T-posts. It's a fence stake that's made for that type of fence. As far as the spacing apart, I'm not really sure. That one area that she mentioned or whatever, I know that area, the fence isn't necessarily standing straight up. So like I said, in the spring when the ground thaws or whatever, I don't have an issue, you know, trying to get some more stabilization on that.
How old is the fence, or how long has it been installed?
I think that was in 20. It was probably in 2018 that you guys requested the fence to be put in.
Is that a galvanized woven wire fence then?
It is, it's a cattle fence, so I'm sure it's galvanized. I don't have the specs on it to know. But it's designed to hold cattle. It doesn't rust.
Thank you.
So, yep.
Any other questions for, please, Ben?
So just right out of the gate, I appreciate the effort you made on the site plan. So I
Sure.
think this has helped my understanding immensely. So I'll just start with that. I think you did a commendable job. I just have a question. So I'm looking at Site 66, and you have a bunch of revisions around that. So you have two triangles denoted as 66. Help me understand that. And then the resort cabin with the proposed expansion doesn't have a lot number?
So, again, I guess to provide some clarity, like Mrs. Miller apparently went to the neighborhood and was talking about expansion. We're not really expanding anything, we're just trying to work within the parameters we already got.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm not related to the comments, just your site plan, so, and maybe this is a clerical issue of some kind, but there's two sites. So I'm gonna try and drag this thing as far as I can over here.
Okay, so before the resort cabin was allowed, we had that cabin as the triangle in the back, because it couldn't be considered a resort cabin until you guys approved it on there, so that would be an update that we would need to make to the site plan, because Currently, Site 66 is just a camping site. The cabin got moved back behind that site because Eagle, or at that time DEQ, basically said, you know, it had to be off an approved site.
So is there just an additional triangle there that should not be
So
there?
that back triangle should be removed. It's just a camping site.
So 65A is its own site. Is that correct?
We called the cabin 65A, so again, we can remove that off of the site plan and we can update the site plan. It shouldn't be there.
So it's just a cabin in,
There's nothing, so 65A is now the resort cabin that was approved at the last meeting. So,
the 2021 meeting, is that?
right, so 65 is just a camping site.
Yeah, I guess the confusion for me again is that I'm looking at the 2021 site plan and I see also and I can't read the numbers here, but I have a circle and a triangle and the box with,
Right.
says resort cabin.
Right.
If I could offer some clarity, so the intent was for Mr. Wills, that site right now, which is known as 65, is currently vacant. There is not a cabin there. His intent would be to put a rustic cabin and then eventually turn it into a resort cabin. Originally, back in 2018, he had placed what is on the site plan as a rectangle. That is a resort cabin, which is not allowed to be on an approved site plan. So he was calling that 65 for a building permit, logistics for people to know where to do the inspections, and then retained 65A on the actual Eagle Site 65. So currently, there's nothing there.
Okay. So I guess just from a site plan perspective, I think this is, you know, I really appreciate what you did here for helping us understand this. Just, I guess from staff perspective, I think it'd be great because, you know, we're going to come about this confusion again, right? So you have proposed changes here that really, on the site plan, these circles, all these circles down here should be rectangles, right? So just so that we don't do this all again in a couple of years, it'd be helpful just to kind of stick with a future proposal if we're proposing, you know, something that's not necessarily there, but what we're intending to be there. But, okay, thank you for the clarification. Sure.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we're going to deliberate amongst the commissioners. If we have questions, we will ask you then.
Appreciate that.
Are you going to open up for public?
Sure, that we should. Anyone in the public like to speak in favor or on opposition of the application? Please come up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Diane Miller, address 5447 Sherwood Highway, Olivet. Brandy Miller already read in what I sent in, and you have the pictures of the photos. My main concern is a little different than what my concern was several years ago when we were all going through this again. The continual expansions changes our rural area, and it makes much more noise, sound, traffic, coming and going, constant commotion. It is hoped that some type of a barrier can be put up, not only to keep people from coming onto my property, into the horse pastures, throwing trash over, just everything that deals with commotions of a campground. The area that Mr. Wills is talking about, you can see pictures here. I don't know the exact number. There's maybe 2 or 3 metal fence posts. The rest is nailed into trees. There's one area where it's wound up, the fence is wound up around a legal survey post. It's just a haphazard fence. Originally, when he put it up for the first year or two, It seemed to help a lot as far as people understanding where the property lines were and that they couldn't come over onto other people's properties. Prior to that, there was nothing. So the fence did help at that point. However, with all the expansions, more people, he's talking now about resort houses. If all of this goes up, and even if it doesn't, it would be very helpful if we could continue the barrier fence that Mr. Hickok has. And I believe it's about 400 feet from where Mr. Hickok's fence is, the solid fence, up to lot number 6. That's an approximate. But if the barrier fence even could go along there, then that would help immensely with all the commotion and the cars coming and going and the lights from everything, the noise. The swimming pool is right down there, and all summer long, I listen to kids squealing and yelling and having a great time, but it's not very peaceful at my place with all that. He talks about the wood line being thick and that he doubts that I can see through there. Well, I can speak for myself, I can see through there. And if you look at picture number 6 that I sent in, that is, and I took these on, I believe it was January 9th, I took these pictures also. If you look through there, that's the areas that he's talking about. Number 6, I'm standing on my property and I'm looking at about 30 foot on my property to the back of the campsites. You can see a picnic table there, and so I can certainly see through. I can sit on my front porch and listen to conversations. I can see through to everything along that line, all spring, summer, and fall. When it originally was a small 71-site campground, it was very family-oriented, it was very quiet, it was very well-managed and run. I didn't have problems with it. The occasional noises and things, you just expect that. But these days, and with the campground again expanding, it's just getting noisier and noisier and a lot more commotion over there. And as you can see, this fence that Mr. Wills says he wouldn't be able to jump over, I walked right over it. There's areas where it's right on the ground, or maybe about 6 foot off the ground, and you can walk right over it. So this fence is not adequate, so I'm hoping for a better fence, one that will help out with all the problems that I have on my end, all the commotion, all the noise, all the lights, all the garbage throwing over, all the people coming over. One solid barrier fence would solve that problem for good, if it's maintained. And I think probably most of the neighbors that have come to me and talked to me, and those that I have gone and talked to, they are all in favor of having some sort of a limit to what the campground can become. They live where they are and on their property because they like the rural area. And I think most professional, well-managed campgrounds would be considerate of their neighbors and would do things like barrier fence to try and keep things a little nicer for the neighborhood. Are there questions?
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Did you have something? Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and deliberate amongst the commissioners. Randy, I've looked through my packet a couple different times. I did not see the updated township recommendation.
Because I received it just before the meeting, the township is recommending a site-proof fence be installed on the east property line between lots, or between sites 6 and 69. And that was communication from Doug Theron, who is the new Walton Township Supervisor.
What is the current fence, the wooden fence end at?
The current fence ends at the end of site 68. So the current fence encompasses sites 68 and 67.
So they're saying from there all the way,
To site 6.
Which type of fence?
A solid 6-foot fence. Privacy fence.
like in the pictures.
A continuation of the fence that is there, correct?
Anybody got any thoughts, or would you like to kind of go through them one by one to see what our thoughts are, or somebody have a better idea?
I'm just not really clear what the fence thing is. So you were talking the solid fence, 400 feet long? Is that what we're looking at
I
here?
don't know how long it would be.
'Cause it just seems,
The applicant seemed to think
Like
it
a
was
lot.
a couple hundred feet is what his estimate was. That's what the township recommended. Obviously, we don't have to take it. So should we go through these one by one? Convert existing rustic cabins located at sites 1 and 3 to resort cabins. Do we have any thoughts?
I guess I'll just start the conversation. There's a few of these I'm going to have some issues with, but I don't think I have an issue with this one contingent on Health Department approval of the septic system.
Anyone else have any disagreement with that?
Is there a square foot limitation? While that cabin currently exists and he's not proposing an addition to it, it would be helpful for staff to know if there is a limitation on the size of the cabin and setbacks from other structures.
So I know we recently reworked some of our very small housing. Maybe the maximum should be the smallest home. But what was the minimum now?
The minimum is now 350 square feet.
And what's the minimum setback for?
So a setback for a home, and an applicant comes to mind is Sunnycrest. The Planning Commission required the buildings to be set back from each other as if they were property lines, so that if the property was ever divided, they could meet setbacks at that time. Minimum setback for structure to structure on the same property is 10 feet. Setback for a home from a property line, side property line would be 20 feet, rear property line would be 30 feet, right of way is 50.
You happen to know what the square footage is of the cabins as they exist?
Yeah, I can probably let you know that. Bear with me, I'm connecting to the internet. Mr. Garrison is going to go grab my computer, and my computer will connect, and I will be able to give you real-time answers for the size of all the structures.
Okay, for now, let's move to number 2. Allow for an addition on an existing resort cabin.
I don't particularly have an issue with that one.
For reference, that existing cabin is 336 square feet, and they're asking for an addition of 300 square feet. So that would be a 636 square foot resort cabin.
Does anyone else have any concerns or questions on it? Realistic, good with them? Lisa, you
I'm good with that
you're
one.
good, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were shaking your head. No,
No.
you weren't.
Nope.
And that's a clarification.
No
is
other
what I was looking
comments.
for. Okay, so it looks like number 2 is acceptable. Okay. Number 3, convert existing rustic cabins located on 64 and 66 to resort cabins.
So just right out of the gate, I think we're gonna have to be careful with this one, and how we put these in the site plan. So I don't know that I'm opposed per se, but you have resort cabins, and then it says down here in the key that resort cabins can have plumbing, so I could just vision a scenario where we come back to having approved something with plumbing when that wasn't our intent. So, if these are intended to be without plumbing, I guess I don't recall what the intent was there.
For clarification, they are currently camping cabins. They are not allowed to have plumbing if they're on an Eagle-approved site. When they have plumbing, they have to be removed from the campground license. They then fall under the regulation of the Planning Commission, and they are known as resort cabins. They're no longer regulated by Eagle at that point. So right now, they are camping cabins that do not have plumbing. They are requesting to convert them to resort cabins, which means that the sites will be removed from the Eagle permit, and they would be turned into a different shape at that point.
But they could be made to be plumbed cabins. Like if I looked at this site plan, it doesn't make a distinction between resort cabins and request number 1 and request number 3.
You are correct. While he circled it and the applicant gave some language, he did not differentiate between the shapes for, is it a camping site, is it a rustic cabin, is it a resort cabin? I do believe, I agree, and I think that if the Planning Commission were to approve it, I could work with the applicant in getting the site plan updated to reflect what's actually on each site currently and what has been approved at this meeting.
So I think if those were reconfigured cabins, I don't know that I would necessarily have an issue with that as long as they were denoted properly on the site plan.
What are any other thoughts from anyone?
Ben, I don't understand the difference between 1 and 3. They're both,
Exactly.
okay.
That was gonna be my question also. 1 and 3 seem to be essentially
Yep.
the same thing in 2 different areas of the campground.
That is 100% correct. They are currently camping cabins that were constructed with building permits. The applicants wish to convert them to resort cabins, which means sites 1 and 3 would be removed from the MDEQ campground license. So essentially, they would fall underneath the regulation of the Planning Commission. How big can they be? What are their setbacks? And at what rate can they be rented?
Okay. We're good with that still, if we get it done correctly? Is that still where you're at, Ben?
So these would all be points 1 and requests 1 and 3 are essentially for the same thing, just on different sites.
That is correct. And I'm looking up the size of the buildings now.
Is everybody okay with number 3? As long as we get stuff updated on our site plan correctly. Assuming by, yeah, sure, Scott?
Would each one of those cabins have to have a permit to, for construction then?
I believe so. Chris is shaking his head, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I do think we ought to limit the size somehow.
limit the size. I think Randy was still getting our stuff for us. So we'll come back to 1 and 3 as far as the size. Okay, construct 11 new resort cabins on site 65, 67, 68, and 107 through 114.
I think here, we would probably want to roll that into whatever restrictions we're putting on 1 and 3 as well. Although there'll be new cabins, and there's currently nothing on those sites. I'd want to see the same building requirements, for brand-new cabins as for expanding existing rustic into resort cabins.
And I'm not sure about what your thoughts are, but I think 1,000 square foot is large
It's very large.
for my thought process. Yeah.
According to this, the average campsite size is 30 by 70, that's 2,100 square feet. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to see anything that's gonna take up like more than half the site, probably. And that, 1,000 square feet seems really large to me.
I don't want houses put out there.
So the cabins that are currently located on sites 1 and 3 are 14 by 22 cabins with a 16 by 14 covered porch. And the covered porch is considered part of the square footage. So the actual cabin itself is 308 square feet and a 6 by 14. So the existing cabins located on sites 1 and 3 are 392 square feet. And I don't believe that there's an addition proposed on those cabins within the application. The cabin that is located on site, not on site 65, as we know, that is listed in here as a 12 by 20 with a 4 by 8 covered porch.
So now that we have the size, do you wanna discuss 1 and 3 a little more? Do you anybody have any ideas what they would like?
If the lots are that small, I don't think you can do the 20-foot apart. Setback.
What was that last size that you quoted?
The existing resort cabin that is adjacent to Site 65, keep in mind I'm saying adjacent because it's not on Site 65. It is 240 square foot existing with a 4x8 covered porch. The applicant is requesting a 300 square foot addition onto that cabin.
Make it about just under 900 square feet.
It would make it around 600 square feet total with the covered porch. Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
What type of foundation are those currently on? Are they on a cement pad or?
The structures are on foundations that are approved by the 2015 Michigan Building Code. There are several different types of foundations that can be installed on these structures. They have been inspected to ensure that they meet the foundation. They're tied down to the property.
Okay, thank you.
What about limiting all resort cabins to something like 500 square feet?
I would be comfortable with that. I don't think it should be any bigger, I don't think.
There may be a need for a group cabin. Never run a cabin as a group occasionally. But I don't care.
I was thinking, since they're talking about making that one that's at the back there, near Site 65, about 600 square feet, maybe make that the maximum for anything that's a rustic cabin there, so that there's some uniformity to the rules we're setting.
What are your thoughts, Ben?
I guess we're splitting hairs. I heard Ray say 600 and Tim say 500. I think that makes sense, and then just keep them all under a certain size. So I guess I'd be fine with 600 for all the resort cabins.
So that would get 1 and 3, and it would allow number 2, but to a maximum of 600 feet. Does that sound like something everybody's comfortable with? Scott, are you?
The other thing I was wondering about was the interior. Does it make any difference as far as, you know, are there like 2 or 3 bedrooms in there, or is it just one big, long room?
It has plumbing, and I don't know that we're dictating unless code dictates there's, must be a bathroom probably.
Minimally, they're required to have a restroom with a shower, sink, toilet, and then the service sink. That's it.
And the restroom has to be a separate room. It has to have a door on it.
So everything else can be open together,
Correct.
except for the restroom.
Yep.
Does that answer your question, Scott?
I think so.
I will have to go back and look. I'm not sure if the bedroom has to have a door on it.
It does.
Yeah, I believe it does. So yeah, the bedroom would have to have a door on it too, but that doesn't mean you can't put bunk beds in there or something.
I guess the other question too would be, does it require a septic system for each one of those cottages?
That was health department issue, wasn't it?
Right. You want to address that, Brandy?
That is a health department issue. I would ask that the planning commission make a regulation and condition that for every cabin that is converted to a resort cabin or constructed new, that health department approval is obtained each time.
Thank you.
Sounds reasonable to me. So it sounds like we have 1, 2, and 3 taken care of. Number 4, resort cabins, are we okay with that? With the 600 square foot maximum? Is that giving,
Same thing.
pardon?
Yeah, the same thing for them.
Right. If you're okay with them constructing up to 11 more as long as they put square footage on here, but as long as they maintained our max of 600. Yeah, Scott.
Does that include the porch like they have on some of them then, as
Yep.
far as square footage?
Yep. Anybody have a craw about that?
If I may, this might be a good time to discuss timeframes for renting and setbacks. And that would take care of all the resort cabin regulations.
Question, is, can we determine setbacks? Is that the code enforcement's?
So the public health code that he listed is for Eagle-approved campground sites. If this becomes a resort cabin, it's no longer on an Eagle-approved campground site. It falls underneath the provisions of local planning and zoning in the Planning Commission's privilege.
When we talk about, when we have 10-foot separation buildings on the same property, isn't that got to do with the fire access?
Typically, yes, it allows for a fire apparatus or an emergency vehicle to get between the vehicles to do whatever needs to be done, whether it's to put out a fire or get an ambulance in or things of that nature.
I'd like to do the setbacks and the time frames, rental time frames. In a little bit, I'd like to get finished on what we're doing as far as the cabins. So my understanding is everyone was okay with number 4, given that maximum square footage. Okay? And then, number 5, and obtain clarification that rustic cabins may be constructed on existing Eagle-approved campsites without additional approval from the Planning Commission.
That clarification was already given by the Planning Commission in April of 2017. It is on record, it just never made it to its conditional use permit.
Okay, so number 5.
Okay, I want to ask a question on that one, because that means that every circle on here can turn into a rectangle.
That is correct.
So, I don't know, I guess that's a little problematic, right? I mean, we're approving the site plan that can morph in sort of any type of way.
It is at the privilege of the Planning Commission. You can remove it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't like that clarification. I don't know whether that was what was intended. I don't know if we have that. I mean,
The
did we
minutes are
vote on
in your-
that specifically?
Yeah, the minutes are actually in your packet. So the staff report that was from December 3rd. A synopsis of April 4th, 2017 Planning Commission minutes regarding CU 101525. Other business. Ms. Williams informed the Planning Commission that they received a letter from Jeff and Carrie Wills requesting a determination on the allowed size of their already approved manager's house to be located on the same property as their campground, Sherwood Forest. Site plan and application listed the size of the approved manager's house as to be determined. Go on further. Address the size for the manager's house. Ms. Williams said no, the closest may be an accessory dwelling unit. Ms. Williams stated that there are rental storage businesses that have managers' houses, but the ordinance does not address them either. Commissioner Catron asked if there was principal residence on the property. Ms. Williams said yes. Trying to get to that section. Ms. Tat stated she does not know the square footage of the home, but believes it is a two-story home. No, sir. Mm-mm. There's a lot of talk about that manager's house. I want to make sure I get it directly from what was provided to you in your staff report. So the planning commission at this meeting made a separate motion regarding the manager's house from the camping cabins. So it goes on, so after the roll call was made on the manager's house, it goes on to say, Ms. Williams informed the planning commission, Ms. Wills, and staff would also like clarification on rustic cabins to be constructed on Michigan Department of Environmental Quality approved campsites. Ms. Williams read an email from Ms. Sarah Rortiers of MDEQ stating MTEQ does not require prior approval for the construction of rustic cabins on licensed campsites because they are not considered any different than a camper or tent. Ms. Williams asked the Planning Commission if a campground owner would need to come back to the Planning Commission for a change of conditions to their conditional use permit if they would like to construct a rustic cabin on an MDEQ-approved campsite. Ms. Williams added that all rustic cabins are still required to obtain building and trade permits from the Eaton County Construction Code Department. Ms. Hatt explained MDEQ requirements for rustic cabins and the nuances between the MDEQ requirements for a rustic and resort cabins as they are quite complicated. So the rustic cabin does not fall under planning and zoning purview. It falls under now Eagle. At the time, 2017, it was MDEQ. So those buildings are still regulated by Eagle. Only rustic cabins, the location. So if the Planning Commission approves a campsite, Eagle allows a rustic cabin to be constructed on that Eagle-approved campsite. If plumbing is put in the building and the minimum plumbing requirements are the restroom and service sink, it's then considered a resort cabin. Those buildings cannot be on an Eagle-approved campsite. Those buildings fall under the purview of the Planning Commission. Does that help? I do see where Commissioner Terrell is coming from, though, with inconsistencies of the site plan and needing to have updated information about what types of structures are listed where.
I guess that was going to be my next question as an applicant. I mean, maybe they can convert them per Eagle's regulations, but do they need to come back and get a conditional use permit if they, I mean, Eagle doesn't determine, whether the applicant meets land use criteria.
Correct. The Planning Commission can require them to come back for every single resort rustic cabin that they would like to construct.
I'll just give my 2 cents. From my perspective, I think that's a non-starter for me, because you can't just say that we can convert any site on this to a rustic cabin at any time without changing conditions. I mean, that just is too much, but I don't know whether I voted on that before. I didn't hear a vote.
It was Commissioner Owen made the motion and Wilson seconded.
We can blame it on Commissioner Owen, but
Sure, blame it on 2 commissioners that are no longer on the.
That's
Planning
right.
Commission.
That's what I do.
But I'm pretty sure you were here too.
okay.
Anyone else have issues with it?
If it means that they can take every last site on there and convert it, put up a rustic cabin, I don't like that.
Yeah, maybe there's a way to denote that again, just with a separate designation, that these are potential sites for conversion. I don't know.
The Planning Commission may want to ask the applicant. It is my understanding, aside from the existing rustic cabins that are there that he's proposing to convert, any place where he's proposing a resort cabin, it would be a rustic cabin first and only converted when the funds were allowed through the campground. I would ask for clarification from the applicant.
I would love to hear from the applicant if that's.
So I guess rephrase the question. I can answer that better. I mean, I would think it'd be better if you guys are concerned about the number that we're gonna put on there, just to put a limit, how many you guys would say is okay before we would have to come back. I mean, again, just because we're asking for it doesn't mean that it's gonna occur. The whole point is to limit the number of times that we gotta come before us, because it seems like every time that we come, it creates more confusion. And again, we're learning every time that we're here, obviously, so that we're not going down that path. But with resort cabins being under your purview and rustic cabins being under Eagle, basically, they're given permission for any approved site that we could put a rustic cabin on it. Resort cabins would be the ones with plumbing. So basically, the rustic cabins is just basically a cabin without plumbing, basically. I don't know if that answered your question.
So how many rustic cabins do you currently have?
So presently, there's 4. However, sites 1 and 3 were originally designed with a bathroom in it, but we needed to go through the Eagle approval for construction, and that's what several of the other meetings was for, is to get an approved plan from you guys that we could submit to Eagle. So that's the whole delay. From the time that 1 and 3 was put on there, that was the intent from the beginning, for those to be resort cabins.
So 1 and 3 are currently rustic cabins.
They're currently considered rustic because we don't have approval for the plumbing. We discussed it several times, but it never made it to the synapses or the vote or whatever you call it. Motion, sorry. I'm learning.
So I guess I understand why your desire for flexibility. I think that's part of what inherently is creating some of the confusion here, right? So I look at this map there from 2021 that we last approved, and those aren't, they're not listed as camping cabins. They're not listed as resort cabins. They're listed as, campsites. And so I don't know how we can get a number that you think, what range do you think you might foresee?
I wouldn't think that we would go more than 20 or 15 or 10. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's a growing operation, and the reality is we haven't had permission to even move forward up until we got permission this last fall. So fortunately, we haven't been able to do anything because we haven't had approval. So me and my wife, it's a small operation. Nothing's going to happen, rapid. You're not going to see multiples in any year. Like I said last time, if you guys wanted to limit it to 2 cabins a year or 1 cabin a year and see how it goes, I leave that to your discretion. I'm not forcing any number on anybody, but having the flexibility just makes it more straightforward and creates us having to come back. And that was a lot of conversation that we've had between the last meeting and this meeting. So again, like I put in the handout, the last handout that we did, that Chris handed out first thing, this all started because DEQ says that, they don't want to review multiple plans. They wanted a 5-year plan. And that's what really blew everything out of proportion, because everybody thought we were building Disney World. And that's not at all what we're trying to do. Basically, we need permission for what could be allowed. It's not saying that we're going to do all that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a clarifying question? So for clarification, you have an Eagle-approved construction permit for the site plan that the Planning Commission approved in '21. The Planning Commission isn't holding anything up. You have a permit to construct that was issued in June of 2024, and it does not expire until June of 2027. I just want to offer that for clarification for the Planning Commission. You have an approved site plan from 2021 that coincides with Eagle's construction permit.
So part of that construction permit is the plumbing, and that's why we're here, because we didn't have approval for plumbing. There isn't anything that I'm allowed to do without the plumbing.
I just wanted to offer that clarification to the planning commission. There is an Eagle-approved construction permit. In that permit, it is in the staff report that I gave to the planning commission back in December.
Basically, that permit includes all the things that we're asking here today, other than removing potential sites for resort cabins. But as those happen, and they update our license on an annual basis, that's when they would remove an Eagle site as soon as it got converted to a resort cabin. So as soon as it has the plumbing put in it, it would be removed for the next year's license.
So if you look at the last staff report that the planning commission received at the December 3rd planning commission meeting, from the back page of that staff report, the third page is the Eagle-approved campground construction permit. It itself is a little confusing as far as what they have approved and what they haven't approved. At the bottom, where it says description of approved construction, adding 16 new sites, that's site 99 through 114, with water, sewer, and electric. That is referring to the campsites getting water, sewer, and electric. Adding 9 equivalent group camping sites, converting 2 camping cabins to resort cabins. That is referring to sites 1 and 3, sorry. Adding sewer connections to 21 existing sites, 1 through 5, 15 through 18, 29 through 31, 42 through 51. A new 2,000-gallon septic tank and 2,000-gallon pump tank is proposed to be permitted by the Barry Eaton District Health Department. So he already has the construction permit that was issued in June of 2024. It expires in June of 2027.
So what are our thoughts on obtaining clarification? Do we want to limit any, like, was an idea? We good? What's the consensus?
I guess, I see a triangle on the 21 site plan for camping cabins. I mean, maybe that could just be a designation that these are sites that could have cabins. I guess, I don't know, maybe I was as confused then as I was now. Maybe I voted for this, but I don't know that I had that understanding. This entire site plan could just change. So that's entirely possible. But I think there needs to be some kind of designation that not all of these sites can have rustic cabins on them. I don't think that was. And yeah, I don't know. I would love to look into the Eagle statute. I don't know by granting him a campsite, I don't know that Eagle can say that he meets local ordinance. I'd be interested to see how that reads, but.
Tim, Ray, Scott,
Questions?
pardon?
You looking for questions?
Yeah, what are your thoughts to what?
Wouldn't it, I mean, if the cabins were built rustic and then they'd come back and say, hey, can we put plumbing in there? That,
They would have to do that.
I mean, they would ask us to convert them to resort cabins.
But do we want all those circles to be rustic cabins? All, who knows how many?
I would like to say something like they could have 10 of them before they come back and ask for more, or something like that.
You guys on this side have any thoughts? Sir Frank?
I guess I hear it, is he saying that's a progressive type thing, as Tim just mentioned, put a number there, so for a span of several years, they can have a target to go at without coming back, just for, we're looking at number 5 here on our list, about the number of them, so they can have a plan. It's not, by the time they get septic and whatever, involved, financial, and expanding, it seemed like at least 10, maybe 15 that they can make a plan to do without coming back here specifically on this point. Because it can be involved with the permits and all that for septic and health department, Eagle and all that.
It looks like if we approved 1, 3, and 4, right off the bat, there's 15 potential resort cabins. Plus, there's the existing resort cabin that's gonna be expanded, so that's 16 right there. So I'm thinking, maybe no more than another dozen that are currently empty campsites can go ahead and have the camping cabins or rustic cabins, whatever you call them, added to them without having to come back and see us. And then that'll make about 25% of the entire campground cabins at that point, if they do all of those before they'd have to come back and see us. I think that's a pretty substantial number right there.
So, you say a dozen?
Maybe an additional, 10, an additional 10 would make it 26 total cabins. Up to 16 of those would be resort, another 10 would be rustic. And if we're looking at 100 sites total, that's 25% of the campground right there with solid structures on them.
I'd like to add for clarification, there are some resort cabins that are already approved to the north side of the property by the pond. So those need to, as you're starting to talk total number of cabins, I want to make sure those are accounted for. Those were approved eons ago as part of the original plan. 4. I just want to make sure that those didn't get lost because they were already pre-approved back in 2018.
Scott?
On the, if we went with, say, like the 26 to allow them, I would like to make sure that the health department is basing their information to take and proceed would be based upon all 26 locations and not on an individual one, because you get 26 of them, the ground and everything may get saturated with waste disposal and everything for drain fields.
They said they wanted one for cabin, its own drain field.
Yeah, but, if there's 26 drain fields,
But we're
is it
going-
gonna be kind of close because of the lot sizes of each one of those?
They won't let them.
Yeah, that's the
that.
health
There's-
department's gonna rip.
Okay.
And guys have any, you have a number you're comfortable with or not? Then 10?
I'm good with 10 or 12. Let's do it.
We say 10 since there was 4 more than we thought? Or
Sure.
than we recollected, maybe? So for number 5, we'll say 10 before having to come back to us again. Number 6, allow the existing single-family home or approved, but not yet constructed manager's home to be used as a rental.
Here, I think it sounds like the zoning ordinance is pretty clear already, that if there's a second home on there, you can't rent it. So we can't really approve it because we'd be breaking our own zoning ordinances.
An accessory dwelling unit can be used to house a relative or an employee of the property owner. An accessory dwelling unit is limited to 1,200 square feet. So if this manager's house were to be considered a use similar to an accessory dwelling unit, the Planning Commission's already approved it to be 1,400 square feet. Keep in mind that approval was also done in 2017. The accessory dwelling unit size was increased to 1,200 square foot in 2024. So that would mean that the existing home that is more than 1,200 square feet would not qualify to be used as an accessory dwelling unit, meaning a relative or employee of the property owner. So they'd be limited to using the already approved 1,400 square foot proposed manager's house for just that, the manager's house.
Okay, so we can't do that, or can't do the ad. Okay. So we're gonna say no on 6. Everybody, Scott?
On that parcel where the house is, could that be split off from the rest of the property to make it a separate parcel?
For clarification, this property cannot be divided. Campground Drive is a legal, non-conforming private road. For the property to be divided in any way, shape, or form, that existing private road would have to be brought up to current county standards for a private road. That would be very tough to do out there.
Okay, move on to number 7, construction of additional playground equipment, specifically a jumping pillow.
I don't have a problem with that.
As long as there's no code against it, I don't care.
Yeah.
Is that, anybody have a different opinion on it? Scott?
Is there other playground equipment out there, such as swings or slides or anything like that?
There is other playground equipment on the property. The playground equipment is well-maintained and looks very nice.
Okay.
So are we okay with number 7?
I am.
Okay, no problems with that. Allow the outdoor storage of equipment for the campground. Anyone have thoughts? Brandy, where's it stored now?
Right now, there isn't a specific approved place out because he also Mr. Wills also operates a property maintenance company. So most of his maintenance equipment is supposed to be within the fenced area for the construction contractors. However, he does have tractors on the property. Tractors are not considered part of the construction contractor's establishment. Staff would not have any issues with tractors or trailers being that they are predominantly used for the campground being located where they are. Staff's concern would be the bucket truck. It's not necessarily any way to say that it's only used for the campground, being that they also operate a property maintenance company. It's staff's opinion that it should be behind the fenced area. The vehicles located to the south of the building, located on the east of Campground Drive, those should also be located behind the fenced area and not to the south of the building. It gets to be a gray area between what equipment is for the campground and what equipment is for the construction contractor's establishment.
My thoughts on here. This is, like you said, it is or it isn't. So that's up, my thoughts are, this is up to you. If it isn't campground, then and it isn't farming, it's behind the fence. So we don't need to address that. You are responsible for, that's your interpretation of it, and your inspections will take care of that. Is that,
I'm comfortable with that, yes.
that should be cut and dry, that shouldn't be,
From the photos that I submitted to the Planning Commission for my January 9th inspection, the bucket truck will be required to be moved behind the fenced area, as will the vehicles and the ditch witch. I could see where the plow truck could remain, given that it is winter, and that plow truck is likely used to maintain Campground Drive. So I would allow that to remain near that building.
sounds very reasonable to me. Okay. Allow for construction of a 400 square foot building to be used for wood storage.
No concerns.
Does anyone have a concern? He's gonna need to get a permit for it. He knows that he needs to get a permit for it then, so
400 feet?
no concern.
Over 200.
Okay. Number 10, allow existing portable bathroom and showers to remain on the property with required permits.
From my perspective, again, I think the picture's immensely helpful. So I think with that visual clarification, I'm okay with that.
Good. Does anyone have a problem with it? Okay, as long as we get the necessary permits, no one has a problem. Okay. Allow flexibility for the location of already approved bathrooms, addition to the existing recreational building.
So for context, item 10 shown, item 10 shown on the site plan that was submitted on December 6th, currently what is shown was already approved by the Planning Commission. Due to isolation distance from the well, Mr. Wills is just asking for some flexibility with that specific addition to allow it to go on either side of the building as necessary to meet Barry Eaton District Health Department requirements for isolation distances.
And I don't have a problem with that.
We're not on 6, we're on 10. We're on 10. I read exactly what you had.
Is that 10, 11, or
10.
11? 11, we're.
It is 11.
So on 11, we were previously approved for construction on both the north and south side of the pavilion. So after our last meeting, we just said instead of making it so it can be either side or whatever, we're just asking for the permission to, if the now approved bathrooms ever fail or they need to be replaced or whatever, that we'd be allowed to build up to 1,000 square feet or whatever size you approve for bathrooms to be permanently installed on the south side of the pavilion. So we're not saying either side anymore. We're specifically saying the bathrooms have to be on the south side of the pavilion to meet the isolation. So before it was either or, now we're saying specifically the south side because that's the only side that it can go on.
So he's no longer asking for flexibility, he's simply seeking approval for the addition onto the building.
Correct. The south side. And later, if I can get clarification on one of your things before you vote, I would appreciate it.
We were kind of hinged on some plumbing permit from something last month when we were talking about it, as I recall.
The required plumbing permit has been obtained. The work has not been dug up for or inspected yet, but the permit has been obtained by a licensed plumber.
1,000 square foot's a lot for a bathroom. I don't know if I'm up for 1,000. Bathroom, that's still a lot.
I do have a question. Would that essentially, would that be replacing the photo of number 10 then? Were that to fail?
No, number 10 would remain. He's asking for the additional
Additional to
Addition.
that?
of 1,000.
Okay. How big is the pavilion now?
It's 60 feet. So if we wanted to limit it to that,
60 by what?
24, I believe.
So 60 by 24 is 1,440 square foot. So another 1,000 square feet would almost double the footprint.
I'm sorry, Scott.
Now, does that include showers and stuff for that facility then? Okay, thank you.
So what are our thoughts on 11?
I think we proved 1,000 before. I think it's just nailing down the location better. So I guess I don't have that much concern.
Anybody have a heartburn with it? Okay. Very quickly, if you have a question on number 6, that's fine.
So even with the manager house or whatever, it would have to be considered a rental for IRS purposes because they're still receiving compensation if they're living there. So that's the only reason we were asking for clarification on that, because you guys were specifically saying it can't be called a rental.
The
If an
IRS,
employee is staying there,
the IRS cannot tell zoning how they classify
I get that.
something.
but I'm just saying if we're using the term rental, I just want to make sure that we still can allow an employee to reside in the manager house. That was the premise of the manager house. So I don't want to get stuck on the term rental.
So the manager's house would be considered an accessory dwelling unit, which allows for the housing of relatives or employees of the principal structure. You just happen to be approved for 1,400 square foot, and that was before the accessory dwelling unit was increased to 1,200
Okay.
square feet.
So I just want to make sure that we're all kind of.
It will be classified as an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, we've went through all of these. We're ready to make a motion. Would you like me to reiterate? Oh, there are a couple things we need to also go on. Oh, I got that.
We needed to clear up whether we're gonna say they have to be 10 feet apart.
Right, setbacks and timeframes. When the applicant was in here before, I believe it wasn't these sites weren't being rented October to, or November to March or something?
At the December meeting, Mr. Wills stated that they wouldn't be rented from October 31st through April 1st, or through, I think, March 31st. He typically rents out, per Mr. Wills, rents out his campsites from April 1st through October 31st.
I think that's something that should be in there. I don't want these to be year-round dwellings. And then we've got setbacks that we got
I think I'd like to discuss the fence issue.
in the fence issue. Thank you.
Mr. Wills would like clarification on the timeframe of the cabin rentals.
So the previously approved resort cabins that is towards the north end of the property, that was designed for year-round use. So if parents at the college or whatever is coming to visit their kids, there's no hotel establishments or B&Bs in Olivet. So that was part of the reason that we were asking for those to be year-round cabins. So those could potentially be rented in the off-season. However, the main campground, we don't anticipate that would even be a possibility because we have to shut the water off in the winter. So the north side
Talking about,
project would be on its own system.
which ones are you talking about?
The original 4 resort cabins that are located to the north of the pond. As you come in Campground Drive and drive south, they're going to be on the east side of the property. And for further clarification, while that may be in the intent of the applicant, it is nowhere in writing that was requested to be, and the Planning Commission has never seen design for those resort cabins. Only these sites were approved to be resort cabins.
So we got setbacks, time, fence. Was there any other miscellaneous things we were gonna try to? Okay. Let's do them one at a time. Fence, what are your thoughts on fence? Ben?
Yeah, I would grant this continues to be expansion. I think it's reasonable to offer additional buffering. I'd like the township's request, so.
68 to 6?
Yep. We've talked about the fence every time we've heard this, and it continues to be an issue.
If the Planning Commission could give a time frame when that fence is required to be installed.
Okay. Are we coalesced kind of around fence? I don't know that Ray is, but
Yeah, no, I'm okay with the expansion. I mean, this is gonna get noisy at this point. Timeframe, though, I mean, all up front or as it goes a bit, or?
I think probably as soon as we get spring, I guess, is what my thoughts are. But
Further clarification, would it be in the intent that it's a minimum 6-foot site-proof fence? To begin construction April 1st, to be completed by July 1st? That's a 3-month period.
everybody kind of comfortable with those dates?
That's doable.
Okay. Timeframe. Do we feel we need to have it vacant October 31st to March 31st, like the applicant stated at the last meeting what his plans were?
I have a question. Where exactly on the site plan? I know you said north of the pond, but it's unclear. Is that the sites that are marked 115 through 119? Is that something different? I'm not understanding where, those are the ones that you wanted to be year-round. So there's 5 of them, not 4.
4 cabins, 5 sites.
Okay.
Personally, I'm okay with a limited rental range as agreed last meeting. You know, just kind of a surprise all of a sudden.
I just want to offer clarification, that's actually incorrect. Those sites are Eagle-approved campsites. The resort cabins are the rectangles located
Oh, immediately
directly
north.
adjacent to the pond.
Okay,
There are not site numbers on those proposed resort cabins.
okay.
And they have been there since the beginning of Mr. and Ms. Wills asking for changes of conditions.
That's, yeah, I just wanted clarification about where we're talking about.
What did you say, Ray? I didn't follow what you were saying.
I was okay if you were doing limiting the year, go from year round to not year round.
We're okay with that.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure what cabins were, because I stepped out for a minute.
The ones he planned on year-round are just north of the pond.
Rustic?
No, the resort. Those were, he was planning on year-round. He said that possibly college parents would want to stay there. Or have, I'm not sure which one.
I don't know how you would regulate that. I wouldn't have a concern if a college parent was there for a few days. But I don't know how you keep it from becoming permanent.
Those are my concerns.
I don't know how I would enforce it either. So without clear limitations, it would be very difficult for staff to enforce.
So I would like the time period to be that camping period.
October 31st, or it'd be closed from October 31st to March 31st.
Another point of clarification is that would only be for the resort cabins. This is a year-round camping facility. So if he has rustic cabins, they would, if for some reason he had heat in there, it could be used. I just wanted to offer that clarification in case 5 years from now, somebody came and gave me a complaint that a rustic cabin is being rented in December for 2 weeks. There is nothing I could do to stop that because it is not a seasonal campground. It is a year-round campground. So the regulation would only be for the resort cabins from April 1st to October 31st.
Okay. So the last thing we have to touch base on is setbacks. Or at least I believe that's all we have to go over, is setbacks. Don't know who said it, but 10 foot between buildings, is that something people are comfortable with? Do we want more? Does that sound good to Chris as building official? I'm looking for a place to start. I heard 10 foot, so that's
10 foot is a required setback between accessory structures. So if a house were already on a property and somebody wanted to put a shed, a pole barn, or a pool, those accessory buildings would have to be located 10 feet from that house. So 10 foot would be a reasonable requirement minimally.
If that's, I think if that's like an amount of space that's approved by emergency services to get in and out, then I don't see why anything bigger than that would be necessary.
Chris, are you comfortable with that as our building official?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our zoning setbacks. I don't imagine they'll end up that close just because the lots are, 1,200 square foot or whatever, so.
We'd want 'em more than 10 foot between structures? I mean, it was just a starting point for us to talk about. I think that would be the minimum to me, but okay with a minimum if nobody wants to suggest different.
I'm
It-
saying 10 foot. I'm picturing 10 feet is enough, you know.
Okay, that doesn't cause anybody any heartburn. Okay,
It wouldn't hurt to say minimally 10 foot and to leave room on the site for the required parking per site as well. So that would help with setback requirements and put regulations there as well. Each site is supposed to have 2 parking spaces.
they could have it in front, they wouldn't have to have it in the side. So
Correct, that would help with the front setback, so we know minimally the structure is going to be 20 feet from the front of the campsite currently. So that gives us an automatic 20 foot from the front setback, and then 10 feet between side to side.
Reasonable.
we can just say they must meet the parking requirements, which would give us our setbacks on the front plus our minimum of 10 foot between buildings. So we have setbacks, we've talked about the fence, we've talked about timetables, being open, maximum 600 square foot for resort cabins. Is there anything else that we need to touch?
Chair, if I may, I have heard all commissioners' concerns about the state of the site plan and not being clear. I do feel at this time it would be appropriate for a new site plan to be submitted, identifying the location of general camping sites, rustic cabins, resort cabins. So with a legend that suits everything being approved. So it's no different than if the planning commission approves somebody, but they haven't put their sign on the property, you essentially require the site plan to be resubmitted for staff's approval in compliance with the motion.
If we're gonna do that, I would like to see a scale on it too. I was gonna do some measuring on here and I can't find a scale.
Just make sure that's part of the motion.
Did anyone take notes good enough to make a motion?
No, I was hoping Tammy made them.
Would you like staff to repeat?
Yeah, I've got them written down too, so.
Approval was given for items 1, 2, and 3. That is the converting the rustic cabins on site 1 and 3. Allow for an addition onto the cabin located on site 65. Converting existing rustic cabins on site 64 and 66 to be no larger than 600 square feet. The Planning Commission approved item number 4, the 11 new resort cabins on sites 65, 67, 68, and 101, 107 through 114, that they be no larger than 600 square feet.
We did 10, right? Was it 10 or 12? I thought it was 10.
10.
It's 10 additional. They were already approved for actually 5, because site 65 was already approved previously. He's only asking for an addition to that existing rustic cabin, and then he was approved back in 18 for the 4 rustic cabins located to the north of the pond. So if we're counting total, what's 12 plus 7? That's how many rustic cabins is currently being requested. That's with his 5 already approved rustic cabins.
Resort cabin. Resort cabin.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Resort cabins.
To approve 4 plus the 4, but we were only gonna allow him to construct 10 more.
Yeah. Construct part.
So this is where a point of clarification, because the 10 before they had to come back was for the rustic cabins. We're speaking about resort cabins right now. It's confusing, I know. So, and that's why I think it's best just to go with the sites, because I have them listed. Those resort cabins cannot be rented between November 1st and March 31st. They're required to be 10 feet from each other and required to meet the parking requirements of Article 10 of the zoning ordinance. Item number 5, an additional 10 rustic cabins may be constructed prior to having to obtain further clarification from the Planning Commission. Each time that those are constructed, the site plan will have to be adjusted to reflect the location of those rustic cabins. Item number 6 was denied. The manager's house cannot be used as a rental, and the additional home on the property may not be swapped out for the manager's house. Item number 7 was approved for the jumping pillow. Item number 8 was approved for the outdoor storage of equipment for the campground with staff's discretion from zoning ordinance requirements between tractors and trailers and items that would be used specifically for the campground versus items that could be used for either a property maintenance business or the campground. Item number 9 was approved for the construction of the 400 square foot building for wood storage with required permits. Item number 10 was approved to allow the existing portable bathrooms and showers to remain on the property with required permits. Item number 11 was approved for an addition onto the existing rec building of 1,000 square feet to be located to the north of the building as shown on the site plan. In addition, each time a resort cabin is constructed, Newberry District Health Department approval is required. A fence shall be installed, a 6-foot privacy fence shall be installed on a lot adjacent to the east property line between sites 6 through 68.
Built between April 1st and July 1st, 2025.
Correct.
And a new site plan with a legend and to scale.
Did I get everything?
I was just gonna ask that, did you miss anything?
No, I talked about the setbacks.
We didn't miss anything. If someone would like to make a motion to, accept all that stuff that Brandy just read off for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve. With CUN number.
CU 10, 15, 25.
Yeah, CU 10, 15, 25, based on the verbiage that we just discussed, as Brandy just recorded to us.
We have a motion, is there support?
Support.
Okay, Lisa has supported. Now we have a motion and discussion, or excuse me, a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Scott Hansen,
Yes.
Ben Terrell,
Yes.
Lisa Lewitsky,
Yes.
Ray Whitaker,
Yes.
Ed Kemp,
Yes.
Tim Catron,
Yes.
Frank Holmes,
Yes.
Brian Ross.
Yes. Okay,
Jeff and Carrie, I probably will not reach out to you till next week to get going on the site plan and what does all this mean for you, but we'll be scheduling something on Tuesday or Thursday of next week, okay?
okay. PA 116 applications.
Included in your staff report, I actually took the applications and kind of condensed them per township. The applicant is the same for all of them, Shane and Nicole Hickey. They are applying for property in Carmel Township, Chester Township, Calamo Township, and Vermontville Township. The properties stand alone, all meet the requirements for acreage and type of crops and amount that is driven from the cash crops that are located on the property. Some of the properties are in fact contiguous, but each application was submitted by itself. So all of the properties meet the requirements for PA 116 approval. And this would be a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, should the Planning Commission choose so.
You don't need approval on it, you just need, formal approval, just say we,
I am okay with the motion that the Planning Commission recommends the Board of Commissioners approve the 12 PA 116 applications as submitted by Shane and Nicole Hickey.
okay?
I move the Planning Commission recommend the 12 applications submitted by the Hickeys for farmland preservation.
I support.
Support.
We have a motion support. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Review and appoint of committee members. Has anybody, thought about appointment or committee? Anybody have any problem with it, want to be on something different?
I'm open to being appointed to something if somebody else wants to get off of it.
I will look at it more, and I will let everybody know at the next meeting, or I can email people and let them know,
I'm happy with where I'm at.
okay? Okay, reports.
Before the Planning Commission is the 2024 annual report. It is a synopsis of the work that the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals has done in the past year. So I would just need somebody to recommend submitting the 2024 annual report to the Board of Commissioners.
I move recommending the 2024 to report to the commissioners.
Support.
We have a motion support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Under reports, the Zoning Board of Appeals did not meet this evening due to lack of business. In front of you, you have our January Public Works and Human Services Committee. Notice that it has changed from Public Works and Planning Committee. It is now the Public Works and Human Services Committee. Something that is incredible to note in there is that we were awarded $50,000 from the Mishta Housing Readiness Program to update our zoning ordinance. In the next month or so, we actually don't have any applications to hear in February, so we're going to have this conversation now. The question for the Planning Commission is, would the Planning Commission like the Zoning Ordinance Committee to be meeting with the consultants and decide the consultants and things of that nature, and go through the update, or would you like to do it similar to the master plan, and where if we didn't have cases, we met still the first Tuesday of every month. If we had cases, then we had a special meeting on the fourth Tuesday of the month. It is at the pleasure of the Planning Commission. I just need to know how to move forward so I can best assist you.
Like the first option, personally.
That it's a zoning ordinance committee. So the reason that the Planning Commission chose to do the entire Planning Commission for the master plan, our zoning ordinance committee is small. It is Ben and Tim. Brian sits in every single time simply because he's the chair, but he's not appointed to that committee. The zoning ordinance committee spent hours upon hours upon hours drafting the solar ordinance. And they were met with challenges when they brought those changes before the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission wasn't privy to the entire conversations had at the zoning ordinance committee meeting, so the Planning Commission was sending them back to the drawing board. It became very frustrating for our zoning ordinance committee. So when you talk about a large update, that same scenario would be happening if it became the responsibility of the zoning ordinance committee. I don't have a preference either way. I just want to make sure that
You anticipate a lot of changes?
I do. The actual zoning ordinance committee will be meeting next week. I do have items on their now living agenda again. Some of the items to discuss are going to be size of accessory buildings and low-density residential property. Is there a reason why we are regulating it when you can't cover a property with more than 20% of structures anyhow? Things like duplexes and limited ag property. There's actually legislation going through right now that would require zoning to allow for duplex on limited ag property anyhow. And we've actually been really fortunate to where we've been ahead of all legislation that's been passed regarding planning and zoning. So hopefully by the time we're done with this audit, update, and zoning map change to be compliant with our master plan, we have a document that's not only easier for the planning commission, but easier for our property owners to understand and be able to apply to their own property.
I'll kick off the discussion, I guess, just my opinion. The impetus for this was some of the discussion about sort of larger economic development projects or projects that don't fit into some of the kind of traditional buckets. And so, I think that's been an issue that's raised a lot of concern in other communities. So I think it might be important to have everybody's buy-in and input when we talk about that. So just solar lessons learned, I guess, but.
It was a little frustrating. Does anyone else have any thoughts on it? Besides Ray and Ben?
I'll take your recommendations.
Okay, let's plan on all meetings going over it.
Okay, we do have an administrative committee. That administrative committee would be the one meeting with the consultants and determining consultants. But then moving forward, it will be held on the first Tuesday of the month for discussion or reviews, unless we have applications, and then it'll be the fourth Tuesday of the month.
Okay. You said no upcoming cases?
No, sir.
Okay. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Please.
Move adjourn.
Motion support. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. We're done.